Welcome to the Thunder and Lightning Show. John the Son of Thunder here with Ryan the Retrograde. And today we want to talk about sidetracking arguments. Now, on like Twitter or the very educated, anywhere where there's a lot of educated people.
Or uneducated people.
I kind of said that sarcastically. But,
yeah.
There's a lot of Catholic arguments that go on. And, I don't think the goal should be to beat people down, but at the same time, we really need to come to common ground and figure out what's going on. And so, Ryan, I'd like to turn it over to you to see what you have on this topic.
Yeah, and I want to say this applies not only to Catholic discourse, but especially to politics, too. And as you mentioned, the idea about sidetracking an argument away. I see this a lot in modern discourse, and as you said, especially on Twitter, Facebook, comm boxes, that instead of addressing the argument at hand, people will try to steer it someplace else in order to avoid an issue, in order to avoid an argument that they will lose, and it's typically because they're on very weak ground. One example in the Catholic sphere that comes to mind is if somebody makes this argument. Vatican II contradicted tradition when it said that there should be religious liberty. Now, a bad guy hears that argument, and they don't want to argue whether or not that's true, because then they've got to face the former magisterium and its weight, and they get into a real debate, which they will lose. And instead they'll say, "You can't say that, that's schismatic." Or, "Vatican II is a real council." No, none of this is actually what we're arguing about. Or they'll say, "You are a Lefebvrist," calling a name.
They say Vatican II is part of the magisterium of the church.
It's magisterium. And none of this is actually what we're discussing here. It's just an attempt to avoid the whole argument, actually. And then it leads into stuff like, "Oh, you're SSPX, and I'm Fraternity of St. Peter, and you're outside the church, and I'm inside the church." And then it's like SSPX is like, "No, you're outside the church, you're a fake church." And then it's Twitter wars and excommunications. And so the argument has never happened to the point at hand, which is, did Vatican II contradict tradition when it said there should be religious liberty, or did it not contradict tradition? So example 2, this is from politics here. Somebody like me might say, Joe Biden is a senile old man that no one in the liberal establishment even liked, and they merely used him as a face to win an election. Now, the bad guys, I guess you'd call them party bosses, the dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. I don't even want to say they're real Democrats. They're just like operatives or whatever, or abortion lovers or something. They hear that and they say, their response to that is, "Trump is literally Hitler. You are a Russian agent." Or, "He's better than Trump, who won't release his taxes. Why doesn't Trump release his taxes?" Again, none of which addresses the fact that Joe Biden is a senile old man who doesn't even know who he is or where he is. None of that addresses the point. It just provokes a fight between Republicans and Democrats. And once you get into that, then it's tribal warfare. "Oh, look at him, he's wearing red. Let's throw tomatoes at him." And then, if the Republicans are like, "Oh, look, he's wearing blue, they're bad." And it's just all this stuff. Example 3. Now, this is an interesting one that I think probably... I'll discuss this at the end when I give the example. Let's say you have a discussion thread on a website or a comm box. It's picking up steam. It's going good. The good guys are proving the bad guys wrong with good arguments. The bad guys aren't able to get it sidetracked. So what happens is the bad guys, or their secret agents, have a couple crazy guys, whether they're actually a crazy guy or a bad guy who's pretending to be crazy, and they sidetrack the thread with ridiculous non sequiturs. So, for instance, if the discussion is whether George Soros controls Pope Francis, the bad guys, instead of addressing that question, will say, "Well, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon from the book of Revelation, and I told you it's terrible, and so the real church is Joe's Bible Church down at the corner us 15 members, we're the remnant, okay? Or somebody will say, like, provide some conspiracy theory and say, like, well, the Jews control the entire world, so what difference does it make whether Pope Francis is controlled by George Soros? Which, if you start talking about the Jews, then the program gets censored or whatever, because in some countries you're not allowed to talk about the Jews, and you're not even allowed to say that there is a group of people called the Jews or whatever. Or here's the last one, if you're back to trying to discuss whether George Soros controls Pope Francis, somebody will come in there and sidetrack and say, all priests molest kids, and we have to put all priests behind bars, and they should get married. We have to force them to get married to women. We have to force them. And again, totally. This has nothing to do. You're crazy, dude. You're absolutely crazy. So these techniques are actually designed to remove the focus from the matter at hand and to get people into a battle formation that the bad guys like, because they can win this battle, or they can hide and not get shot at. So I see these things happen a lot on Twitter or on Godlike Productions, which is a conspiracy site that I like to read. And I think, by the way, Vigano and Bishop Williamson also read a lot on Godlike Productions. But anyway, so they're done intentionally to derail the thread and to keep people from discussing or acknowledging an important point. So let's talk about how to counteract this technique of the bad guys to derail the conversation, how to take countermeasures against this sidetracking.
So here's an example. Ryan, what's your opinion on Vatican II?
Well, I think Vatican II, from the very beginning, the bad guys, the modernists, the liberals, hijacked that council. And they took it in a direction that was contrary to the tradition of the church.
Oh, you're SSPX.
Well, that's a very interesting remark, but I'd rather discuss the merits. Was Vatican II in line with tradition or not? What do you think, John?
Well, I think that you're SSPX and that you're schismatic and you need to obey the church.
We'll discuss that afterwards, but I'd really like to know what you think about Vatican II. Was it hijacked from the beginning by liberals? I mean, it's in the book. It's in the book, Rhine Flows into the Tiber. How can you disagree with that book? It was written by a priest who gave a first-hand account.
Well, I think that Vatican II is part of the church magisterium, and so therefore we must obey the church.
But was it hijacked or not, John?
You know, I'm not very good at playing this part, but you can see what.
No, you're doing a good job. You just keep deflecting.
Well, I'd probably log off and just.
You probably would. You would have posted. You would have posted a meme. Yeah, it would be like me roasting in hell.
An eye-rolling meme, or maybe I'd block you. Or
block me. Yeah.
But that's how it often. And the thing is, I started using the SSPX thing. We never said anything about the SSPX. We never said anything about rejecting Vatican II at all. You just said that your opinion was that
Vatican
the liberals
II was hijacked by the liberals.
And this is the sort of discussions that we have on Twitter, is that the people, and actually I want to say, what's his name, Father Matthew Schneider, he's a Legionnaires
Disease of Christ.
Yeah, Marcial Maciel, he's been he's been doing a lot of that recently, been supporting vaccines, and I mean, I don't know, it's very common by priests to say you must obey Vatican II, like on Twitter, the Twitter priests.
Yeah.
But they need to maintain their Twitter personality while at the same time maintaining their. I don't know if they're trying to convince themselves to continue to say the Novus Ordo or what.
It might be. Since I don't go on Twitter anymore, I don't know what they're saying. I mean, who cares about a vaccine? Are people losing their soul or saving their soul? Isn't that what's important? And this vaccine stuff, why don't you just leave that to people's conscience? I mean, after all, remember, Pope Francis wants everything up to your conscience. Like whether you have sex with a woman not your wife or not, and whether you get a civil union or not, or whether you're a Protestant or an atheist or a Catholic, it's all up to your conscience. So let's let the vaccine and masks and all this stuff be up to your conscience. Remember, that's what the Pope's document, which I highlighted here on that fantastic program. You remember we did it about Amoris Mastitia? It was the Pope's best encyclical he's ever written by far, where he said you have to understand the complex circumstances that people live in. Okay, we can't be too rigid about wearing masks. Okay. And so you need to discern the Spirit. The Holy Spirit is blowing, and sometimes the Holy Spirit goes, and your mask blows away. Okay, and let's not be so rigid here about this. And and anyway, don't be so rigid about vaccines and who's getting it and all that stuff.
You can find that in the link. You can find Amoris Mastitia in the link below.
Yeah. Okay, John. Example number 2. You had that situation, I don't remember if it was in Detroit or Atlanta, not sure, but they were counting the votes, and they said, oh, it's late, everybody's got to go home, and by the way, a pipe broke and water's all over the place, so we can't do any more counting. So they kicked out the Republicans, and they kicked out the journalists, and some people lingered around, and then when everybody was gone, they started pulling out ballots from underneath tables and cases, and they're running them through the machines, and let's run them through again, and then run them through a third time, and all this stuff. And meanwhile, this is that huge spike of Joe Biden. Now, John, don't you think that this is suspicious? Why are they counting votes in the middle of the night after kicking everybody out? We have the video. Ballots are coming from these cases underneath tables, and there's nobody there, no observers, no judges. Isn't that suspicious? And shouldn't it raise questions as far as the integrity of this election?
No, they had a lot of mail-in ballots that they were counting. It must have been those. And people are just making excuses for Donald Trump. He lost fair and square. Even CNN says so.
But you're begging a question. I've said to you that it doesn't seem fair and square when you have ballots coming out of nowhere, and I don't think these are absentees. And even if they are, let's look at these ballots with all the observers there and check out the envelopes, and not do it in the middle of the night when there's no observers.
This is Trump conspiracy.
Oh, well.
And plus, that's not safe. Are they social distancing? How many people touch those ballots?
John,
we're dealing with the pandemic.
You
here.
are concerned about integrity of elections, right?
Well, last election, if you're talking about integrity, Trump rigged it, or Russia rigged
So
it
you're
in favor
okay
of Trump.
with cheating an election? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if I have to pretend I'm a liberal, I would have to admit
Aren't you
yes.
concerned? Don't you want every legal vote to be counted and make sure these ballots are true ballots and not run through the machine 3 times? That is something that you would be concerned about, right?
Well, since I'm pretending to be a liberal, every vote counts except for the Trump supporters' votes.
And some votes count twice if you are a Democrat.
And there should be an IQ test for the people who are voting to be eligible to vote. Let the immigrants in, don't test them.
Uh-huh.
And that's nothing to say bad about the immigrants, but we have to make. Plus, it's too hard to make the IQ test in Spanish, and so don't do an IQ test for the immigrants, but allow the.
John, this is you're sidetracking this with conspiratorial talk. I'd like to just focus on that issue. Don't you think that it is questionable to count votes in the middle of the night with no observers, nobody from the Republican Party there?
I don't think it's conspiracy when Trump is literally Hitler.
Oh, there we go. See? Now, how do you avoid this? Again, you try to go back and say, John, I'd be willing to discuss the literally Hitler thing with you, but let's just discuss these ballots that are right here. Why can't you agree that these ballots should be adjudicated and questioned? Why they should not be counted when nobody is there to observe the counting? It is a recipe for a disaster.
I think that's racist.
Okay, now you block me on Twitter and you post laughing memes or something like that.
Or something mean.
Something
like a middle
mean.
finger.
Yeah, like, you're so ugly. If a worm looked at you, he would vomit, or something like that.
Yeah, stupid Trump supporters. I probably would have blocked you several minutes ago.
As soon as you saw I was wearing a MAGA hat, you would have blocked me.
Yeah, for sure. That's how. I don't know. That's kind of how political discourse is, though. I don't. And in my experience, I just don't know that there's really any reasonable way to discuss with these types of people.
Not on the internet, no. The only
Not
way
even in person.
I think in person you can probably do some discussions with people. Again, I don't really know any hardcore libs. I don't know anybody who really even supports Joe Biden, even if people who voted for him. But I mean, the thing is, like at work, at the place where I work, everybody is a Trump supporter. And what were the other things we were talking about, like church stuff?
SSPX.
SSPX.
Vatican
Everybody. I know one guy who goes to our lad mass who's kind of skeptical of the SSPX position. He makes a good remark,
Well-
but he makes a good argument. But I think it's built on his argument is built on faulty premises.
Well, and I think with the SSPX, I mean, if you don't like the SSPX, then don't go.
Yeah.
And and I think that I can respect people who say, well, I don't really want to go to the SSPX.
But it's not enough for them to say like that. For some reason, there's this crowd out there who's like, oh, John, you go to SSPX.
My goodness, don't you know? Let me find all these quotes from the 60s and 70s which are no longer relevant, but they help support my argument that, well, Paul VI said there, Archbishop Lefebvre's going down a wrong path. My goodness, it's a wrong path, and why he needs to come back. And Cardinal Casserole, Cardinal Green Bean Casserole, well, he said that this is, he's suspended, danger, and John Paul II, or one of his henchmen wrote in the document Ecclesia Dei, well, it's a schismatic act, so, my goodness, why don't you need to stop this.
So again, we're talking, it's a Karen. So there's a Karen who can't mind, they can't mind their own business. And so they got to come over here and start minding your business about where you're going to mass, SSPX or whatever. And even if your church is closed because of the pandemic,
you can't go to
you
the
still
SSPX.
can't go to the SSPX because no mass at all is better than priests with no canonical status or whatever, Okay, whatever.
That was granted canonical faculties by Pope Francis.
By Pope Francis.
Oh, well, you still can't go to the SSPX. Well, who's being disobedient?
You're literally Hitler. Why don't you listen to what I'm saying? You're literally...
Well, the SSPX are literally Hitler, according to Church Militant.
Church Militant, yeah.
These are the tactics of the liberals, are name-calling.
Name-calling, distractions, red herrings, non sequiturs.
I don't know. I think you can easily tell right off the bat whenever you're in a discussion with someone if they're going to just take it off the deep end or not.
And when it comes to the internet, most everybody's whacked out. So just stick with the forums, the comm boxes, whatever, friends on Facebook or email that you know who they are and they're not whacked out. But, maybe in real life, like you have some family members who are in the virus religion. But
I might cut that.
yeah, because they watch this program.
Some of them.
Well, who can I say? Do you
No, go ahead. Keep going.
So you know some people who subscribe to the virus religion, but you are able to talk to them about this stuff, and they haven't.
Not really.
Oh, okay.
Because I haven't seen them for I don't know how long.
Well, one thing I do is I just say, like, if you find, like, there was that article in the Journal of American Medicine, or Johns Hopkins Journal.
Johns Hopkins published a study.
That Brent sent us, and it said, like, there's no scientific proof of asymptomatic transmission of the coronavirus. And then so you say, John, you believe in science, don't you? So this journal article says that there's like no chance of asymptomatic transmission of this virus. So we don't need to be worrying about masks and all this stuff. This isn't scientific. It's like voodoo or whatever.
Yeah, and actually I did see another study in Johns Hopkins where I think they did a study on the death rates, and the death rates were about even.
Yeah.
But the COVID was a majority of 2020.
Everybody's dying of COVID, nothing else.
So
whatever.
What happened? So anyway, that's another study, and you point to these actual studies with actual numbers, and Johns Hopkins is a very reputable, medical school, and so you're having these master's students do statistics, and then drawing conclusions based on their statistics. Well, what? I mean. Can you discount that?
It's bad science because it disagrees with my preconceptions. See, we manipulate the data to prove our hypotheses, and we call this the new science.
Yeah, and then you just get crazy conspiracy theories as responses. So
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah. But anyway, do you have any closing thoughts?
Some conspiracy theories are seem more reasonable than the mainstream narrative that comes from the papers.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so don't automatically discount something that comes from a conspiracy site like Godlike Productions or whatever, because, okay, 90% of the time it's crazy, but 10% of the time these people are spot on and they know what they're talking about.
Well, I think the real conspiracies are on CNN and NBC.
Exactly.
And even Fox News.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a sad state that we're in, but I mean, you know, you got to be skeptical of everything, and I think the viewers are smart enough to look in the description and see our references. And
We have the smartest viewers, don't we, John? Top.
For sure.
I bet the IQ level of our viewers is probably minimum 150, the people that watch this show. Our viewers, as their IQ levels are being raised, it's like, what is that saying, that the high tide raises all ships? And ladies and gentlemen, this is the pinnacle of discussion on YouTube, the John the Son of Thunder program.
I don't know what my IQ is. I could probably take one of those online IQ tests. What's your IQ in 10 questions? All right. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for watching. What's your IQ? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to, in your discussions, just make sure to use these points in your discussions.
Stay
as liberals,
on point.
because we are the lady,
And we will not be silent.